Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Lingerie always loved the night sky. The way the stars pierced through the dark canvas above, the feeling of calm it brought after the hectic rush of the city, as her sanctuary. So when her friends invited her to a rooftop observatory party on a new moon night, she didn't hesitate. The evening air was crisp cool against her skin as she leaned against the railing, watching the city lights flicker below. The sky stretched above her, an endless sea of black. The laughter of her friends echoed in the background, but Ixioka's attention was elsewhere. Something felt off. The city was unusually quiet, and the darkness in the sky didn't feel comforting. It felt heavy, almost oppressive. A cold wind swept across the rooftop, causing Pixagi to shiver and pull her jacket tighter around her body. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, another news alert. New moon prophecy goes viral. World apocalypse foretold. It was probably just another internet hoax, some bored conspiracy theorist looking for attention. But still, the timing was strange. She opened the article out of curiosity. On the night of the new moon, a prophecy has been uncovered from ancient texts. When the sky bears no light, a crescent will rise to end all. Only the child of the crescent can prevent the collapse of all existence. The word sent an involuntary chill down her spine, and Aksaki quickly locked her phone. She glanced up at the sky again, suddenly feeling a knot of anxiety settle in her chest. The rooftop felt colder. Now, like the darkness above was pressing down on her, she rubbed her arms, trying to shake the sensation. Her friend immediately came over, holding 2 cups of hot tea. You okay? Exactly. You've been staring at the sky for like 10 minutes straight. Did a star catch your attention? Ixioki forced a smile and took the tea. Yeah, just the air feels weird tonight. You know, me. I nodded. Yeah, I feel it too, kind of eerie. Maybe it's sent because it's sent new moon. Or maybe we were all just freaked out by that apocalypse prophecy going around. Yeah, probably. Maxiaki sipped her tea, trying to calm herself. It's just a stupid rumor. Anyway, people love to make things up on the internet. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something waiting. Later that night, after the party, Maxiaki lay in bed, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. The city was quiet outside, and the darkness of the new moon still hung in the air. She couldn't stop thinking about the prophecy. It was ridiculous. She knew that. But why couldn't she shake the feeling of dread that had settled deep in her bone? Her eyes grew heavy, and soon she drifted off to sleep. The dream came immediately. In the dream, she stood in a place she didn't recognize. A barren wasteland stretched endlessly in every direction. The ground cracked and lifeless, the air thick with the stench of decay. Above her, the sky was a swirling mass of darkness, no stars, no light, just an endless void. A figure appeared before her, cloaked in shadows. The figure's size was obscured, but its voice was clear, echoing inside her mind. You are the child of the crescent, the figure whispered. The world of fate rests in your hands. If you do not act, all will fall into darkness. Except Angelkati tried to move, but her feet were rooted to the ground. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. What do you mean? The figure raised a hand, pointing to the sky. When the crescent rises, the end will begin. You must find the way to stop it. Angelkati looked up and gasped. In the sky, where there had been nothing but darkness, a faint crescent shape began to form, glowing with a pale, eerie light. As it grew brighter, the ground beneath her feet began to crumble, the cracks widening as the earth gave way. The figure's sad voice echoed again, more urgent. Now find the artifacts, unlock the crescent's secret. The world depends on you. Before Hizeki could ask anything more, the ground beneath her collapsed, and she fell into the darkness below. Ixkenegakir awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. Sweat clung to her skin and her sheets were twisted around her leg. She sat up, trying to catch her breath, the remnants of the dream still fresh in her mind. The child of the crescent, the prophecy, the artifact. It was just a dream, it had to be, but as she swung her legs out of bed and stood up, she felt a strange sensation on her arm. She glanced down and her breath caught in her throat. On her wrist, faint but unmistakable, was a crescent-shaped mark. And she stumbled back, her pulse racing. This wasn't her possible. It had to be a trick of the light, a leftover image from her dream. But when she reached for her phone and shined the light on her wrist, the mark was still there. It was real. Her mind raced. What was happening? Was the prophecy real? Was she actually the child of the crescent? She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought, but the mark on her skin wouldn't tell her. She needed answers. The next morning, Axiaki found herself wandering the city in a daze. She couldn't trust up thinking about the dream, about the mark on her wrist. She spent the entire night searching for information online, but everything she found only led to more questions. She didn't know where to start or who to talk to. Her friends would think she was crazy if she told them what was happening. As she walked down a quiet street, her eyes caught sight of a small old bookstore tucked away between two buildings. The sign above the door read Sawo, Curiosities in faded, hand-painted letters. Something about the store called to her, and before she knew it, she was stepping inside. The scent of old paper and incense filled the air, and shelves packed with ancient-looking books lined the wall. At the back of the shop, an old man sat behind a cluttered counter, flipping through a leather-bound tome. He glanced up as she approached, his eyes sharp and knowing. "You've come for answers," he said, his voice low and raspy. How did the crescent mark? He interrupted, nodding toward her wrist. "I have been waiting for you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" "My name is Owaso," the old man said, closing the book and standing up. "And I'm the keeper of the prophecy. I've been waiting for the child of the crescent to appear for a long time." Yoki stared at him, her mind racing. "This is impossible. How do you know about the prophecy? About me?" Solao smiled faintly. "There are many things you do not yet understand." "Exactly. But time is short and the world is in grave danger. You must find the artifacts and unlock the crescent's secret before it's too late." "The artifacts?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What are they? Where do I find them?" Zofu walked over to a nearby shelf, pulling out a dusty map and laying it on the counter. "There are 3, he explained, each tied to one of the elements, earth, fire, and water. Together, they hold the key to preventing the apocalypse, but they're hidden, guarded by ancient forces that will test you in every way imaginable." "Yes." Shiseika's head spun. "Why me? I am not a hero or some chosen one. I am just me. Sunny skies, gas, and you may not feel like a hero, but fate has chosen you. The mark on your wrist is proof of that. You are the only one who can stop the crescent's arrival." Exiboiki stared at the map, her mind whirling with fear and uncertainty. This was all too much, too fast, but the mark on her wrist, the dreams, there was no denying that something was happening. "What happens if I fail?" she asked quietly. Dohu's expression darkened. "If you fail, the world as we know it will cease to exist. The darkness will consume everything." Jixenel swallowed hard. She didn't know if she could do this, but she had no choice. The world was counting on her. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. "I'll find the artifact." Siu nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Good then, we must begin immediately. Time is running out." To find the artifacts began the very next day. Armed with the map Siu had given her, she ventured out of the city, leaving behind everything she had known. Her first destination was an ancient forest, deep within the mountains, where the earth artifact was said to be hidden. The further she traveled, the more the weight of the prophecy pressed down on her. Every step felt like it carried the fate of the world. And as she neared the forest, with tension, as if the very earth itself was aware of her presence. When she arrived at the entrance to the forest, she paused. The trees loomed above her, their branches twisting and curling in unnatural ways. There was no sound, no birds, no wind, just an eerie silence that made her skin crawl. Taking a deep breath, Axiaki stepped forward into the shadows of the forest. Izadivaki stepped into the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The air grew colder, heavier with each step. The light from the sun seemed to vanish as the canopy thickened, casting the woods into an eerie twilight. The trees around her twisted in unnatural ways, their branches resembling bony hands reaching out as if to grab her. There was a stillness to the place, an unnatural silence that made every crunch of leaves underfoot feel like a thunderclap in the quiet. Her grip on the map tightened. According to Zatura, the earth artifact was buried deep within this forest, protected by ancient forces, but where she couldn't too shake the feeling that someone was watching her. As she ventured deeper, a thick fog began to roll in, wrapping around her ankles and creeping upward like tendril. HFY hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around for any sign of danger. She pushed forward, trying to ignore the nagging sense of dread that had been building inside her since she left the city. The trees seemed to close in on her, the path narrowing until it was barely wide enough for her to pass through. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. Segi stumbled, catching herself on a nearby tree trunk. The earth rumbled beneath her, a deep guttural sound that made her heart skip a beat. Something was coming. She looked around frantically, but there was no one in sight, just the twisted trees and the thickening fog. The rumbling grew louder and the ground began to crack, the dirt splitting apart as if something was rising from beneath. Then in the center of the clearing ahead, the earth exploded upward, and from it emerged a massive figure made entirely of stone. Its body was carved with ancient symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. The creature stood at least 10 feet tall, its eyes burning with an inner fire as it stared down at her. Exhale, Clydio's breath caught in her throat. This had to be the guardian Zafu had warned her about. The stone giant raised a hand, and the ground trembled beneath her again. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no time to think, she had to act. She darted to the side just as the giant's hand slammed into the ground where she had been standing. Dirt and debris flew into the air, and Izayaki barely had time to shield her face from the impact. Her mind raced. How was she supposed to defeat something like this? The giant moved toward her again, its heavy footfalls shaking the earth with every step. Izaki dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding another blow. She had no weapon, no way to fight back. But then she remembered Howard's. This wasn't TOA, battle of strength. The trials weren't to be about defeating the guardians with force. She had to think. The earth, the artifact was tied to the element of earth. That meant she needed to connect with the ground, with the energy beneath her. But how? Her eyes darted around the clearing, searching for anything that could help. Then she saw it, a small stone half buried in the ground at the base of a nearby tree. It glowed faintly, just like the symbols on the giant's body. It had to be the artifact. Hexio Cap bolted toward the tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The giant turned, its gaze locking onto her as it lumbered after her. She reached the tree just as the giant raised its hand to strike again. With trembling hands, she grabbed the stone, feeling its cool surface pulse beneath her finger. The moment her hand closed around the artifact, a surge of energy shot through her. The ground beneath her feet seemed to come alive, the earth shifting and moving at her command. She turned to face the giant, her fear replaced by a strange sense of calm. The giant swung its arm toward her, but this time, Exampi didn't run. Instead, she closed her eyes and focused on the energy coursing through her. She could feel the ground beneath her, the roots of the trees, the stones buried deep in the earth. She reached out with her mind, and the ground responded. A wall of earth rose between her and the giant, blocking its attack. The stone fist slammed into the wall, but it didn't break. Jisuyoki opened her eyes, her heart racing with the realization that she was controlling the earth itself. She raised her hand, and the ground beneath the giant began to shift. The creature stumbled, losing its balance as the earth twisted and buckled beneath its feet. With a final gesture, Ixenaki sent the giant tumbling backward, its body crashing into the ground with a deafening thud. For a moment, there was silence. Vexteloki stood frozen, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The giant lay still, its glowing eyes dimming as the light in its body faded. She had done it. She had passed the trial. She looked down at the stone in her hand, its glow now steady and warm. This was the Earth artifact. The first of 3. As she held it, she felt a strange sense of peace, as if the Earth itself was welcoming her. But there was no time to rest. This was only the beginning. Days later, Exaki found herself standing at the edge of a vast desert, the heat radiating off the sand in waves. The fire artifact was said to be hidden here in a place where the sun burned hotter than anywhere else on Earth. She had followed Kusi's map to this point, but there was still no sign of the artifact or the guardian that protected it. The journey had been grueling. Every step she took seemed to sap her strength. the heat oppressive and unrelenting. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked from the sun. She had never felt so exhausted, so drained, but she couldn't truly stop. Not now. As she ventured deeper into the desert, the landscape began to change. The sand beneath her feet turned black, charred by some ancient fire. The air grew thicker, hotter, until it felt like she was breathing in flames. She knew she was getting close. Then, in the distance, she saw a mountain of blackened stone rising from the desert floor. The fire artifact had to be there. She trudged forward, her legs heavy, her body screaming for rest. The heat was unbearable. It felt like she was walking through an oven, but she couldn't stop. She had to reach the artifact. When she finally arrived at the base of the mountain, she collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The stone was hot to the touch, burning her skin as she reached out to steady herself. She looked up, squinting against the glare of the sun, and saw the narrow path winding its way up the mountain. Exhaling, she forced herself to her feet and began the climb. Every step was a struggle, her body protesting with every movement. The heat was suffocating, the air so thick she could barely breathe. But she kept going, driven by the knowledge that the world was depending on her. As she neared the summit, the ground beneath her feet began to rumble. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The fire guardian was close. Suddenly, the ground erupted in flames, and from the inferno emerged a towering figure made of molten lava. Its body glowed with a fiery intensity, the heat radiating off it in waves. The fire guardian stood before her, its eyes burning with fury. Exhaling. Teared up at the creature, her heart racing. This was it, the second trial. But how was she supposed to defeat a being made of fire? The guardian raised its arm, and a torrent of flames shot toward her. Izanyofi barely had time to dive out of the way, the heat scorching her skin. As she rolled across the ground, she scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. The artifact. She had to find the artifact. Her eyes scanned the summit, searching for any sign of the fire artifact. There, near the edge of the cliff, she saw a small, glowing ember nestled among the rock. The guardian moved toward her, its molten body radiating heat that made the air around it shimmer. Exaniki ran, her legs burning with exhaustion, but she pushed through the pain, reaching the edge of the cliff just as the guardian raised its arm to strike again. With a final burst of energy, she lunged forward, grabbing the ember with both hands. The moment her fingers closed around it, a wave of heat surged through her, filling her with a burning energy. The flames no longer felt like they were consuming her. Instead, they were a part of her. She turned to face the guardian, her body now radiating the same fiery energy that surrounded it. The creature paused, its burning eyes locking onto her. Ixaki raised her hand, and the flames around the guardian responded, swirling around her in a controlled inferno. She had become one with the fire just as she had with the earth. With a final command, she sent the flames crashing back toward the guardian. The creature roared in defiance, but it was no match for the power Ixaki now wielded. The flames engulfed the guardian, consuming it in a fiery explosion. When the smoke cleared, the guardian was gone, its molten body reduced to a pile of smoldering rock. Ixaki stood at the edge of the cliff, the fire artifact glowing in her hand. She had passed the second trial. But there was still one more to go.